On a quiet summer night in June 1912, the small town of Villisca, Iowa, became the site of one of America's most brutal and perplexing unsolved murder cases. 8 people, including 6 children, were slaughtered in their beds with an axe. And over a century later, the killer's identity remains a mystery that continues to haunt investigators and true crime enthusiasts alike. The evening of June 9, 1912, started like any other in the peaceful farming community of Villisca. Josiah Moore, a respected local businessman, attended a children's program at the Presbyterian Church with his wife Sarah and their 4 children: Herman, 11, Catherine, 10, Boyd, 7, and Paul, 5. The Moore children had invited 2 friends, Lena and Ina Stillinger, ages 12 and 8, to spend the night at their house after the event. The family returned home around 9:45 p.m., completely unaware that someone was waiting for them. What happened next would shock the nation and create a mystery that has never been solved. The next morning, when the Moores failed to appear for their usual morning routines, a concerned neighbor, Mary Peckham, noticed something was wrong. The house remained eerily quiet well past the time when the family should have been up and about. The doors were locked and the curtains were drawn shut, which was unusual for the typically active household. Around 8 a.m., Mary asked Josiah's brother to check on the family. When he unlocked the door and stepped inside, he discovered a scene of unimaginable horror. All 8 victims had been bludgeoned to death with an axe while they slept. The killer had methodically moved from room to room, striking each victim with the blunt side of the axe before delivering fatal blows with the blade. The brutality of the murders was staggering. Josiah Moore's face had been beaten so severely that his eyes were completely destroyed. Each victim had been struck multiple times, with some receiving over 30 blows to the head. The youngest children had been tucked carefully into their beds after being killed, suggesting the murderer had taken time to stage the scene. But the killer's actions revealed something even more disturbing than the murders themselves. After committing these heinous acts, the perpetrator had remained in the house for hours, performing a series of bizarre rituals. Every mirror in the house had been covered with clothing, and a basin of bloody water sat in the kitchen, suggesting the killer had washed up before leaving. The murder weapon, the Moore family's own axe taken from the yard, was left leaning against the wall in the downstairs bedroom. Food from the icebox had been partially eaten, and a plate of uneaten food sat on the dining room table. Cigarette butts were found throughout the house, indicating the killer had smoked while spending hours with the bodies of his victims. Most chillingly, all the curtains had been drawn and cloth had been draped over the windows, plunging the house into complete darkness while the murders were committed. The investigation began immediately, but it was plagued with problems from the start. Dozens of curious townspeople trampled through the crime scene before it could be properly secured, destroying crucial evidence. In an era before modern forensic science, investigators had few tools at their disposal to solve such a complex case. Several suspects emerged over the following months and years, but none could be definitively linked to the crime. The most prominent suspect was Reverend George Kelly, a traveling minister who had attended the children's program at the church that night. Kelly had a history of mental illness and later confessed to the murders on multiple occasions, though he repeatedly recanted his confessions. Kelly stood trial twice for the Villisca murders. The first trial, in 1917, ended with a hung jury, and he was acquitted in the second trial due to lack of physical evidence connecting him to the crime. Many believed Kelly was guilty, while others thought his confessions were the product of a disturbed mind seeking attention. Another suspect was Frank Jones, a Villisca businessman who had a bitter feud with Josiah Moore. Jones had allegedly hired a hitman named William Mansfield to kill the Moore family as revenge for a business dispute. Mansfield was known to have committed similar axe murders in his past, making him a compelling suspect. However, no concrete evidence ever emerged to prove either man's involvement. The case grew even more mysterious when investigators discovered that similar axe murders had occurred throughout the Midwest between 1911 and 1912. In each case, entire families were killed in their beds with an axe, mirrors were covered, and the killer spent hours in the house after the murders. Some investigators believed a serial killer was traveling by train between small towns, but this theory was never proven. The Villisca Axe Murder House destroyed the small town's sense of safety forever. Parents began locking their children's bedroom doors from the outside and sleeping with weapons nearby. Some families moved away entirely, unable to cope with the fear that the killer might strike again. Over the decades, the case has attracted countless investigators, psychics, paranormal researchers, and true crime enthusiasts. The Villisca Axe Murder House still stands today and operates as a museum, offering overnight stays for those brave enough to sleep where 8 innocent people were brutally killed. Visitors to the house report strange occurrences, unexplained sounds, objects moving on their own, and the overwhelming feeling of being watched. Some claim to have captured evidence of paranormal activity, though skeptics dismiss these claims as the power of suggestion working on people who know the house's dark history. Modern investigators have attempted to use advanced forensic techniques and criminal profiling to solve the case, but the passage of time has made it nearly impossible. Physical evidence has been lost or contaminated, witnesses are long dead, and crucial details were never properly documented. The question of who killed the Moore family and the Stillinger sisters remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. Was it Reverend Kelly, driven by religious mania? Was it a hired killer seeking revenge for Frank Jones? Or was it an unknown serial killer who traveled the Midwest, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake? What makes the Villisca case particularly haunting is not just the brutality of the murders, but the calculated nature of the killer's actions. This was someone who took their time, who performed rituals, who stayed in that house of death for hours while the rest of Villisca slept peacefully. The covering of mirrors suggests a possible superstition or psychological compulsion, while the careful tucking in of the children's bodies reveals a twisted sentimentality. More than a century has passed since that terrible June night, and the truth about what happened in the Moore house has been lost to time. 8 innocent lives were stolen, a community was forever changed, and a killer walked free, never to face justice for one of the most horrific crimes in American history. The White House on 2nd Street in Villisca, Iowa, stands as a permanent reminder that some mysteries are never solved and some horrors are never fully understood. The spirits of the Moore family and the Stillinger sisters rest in the local cemetery, their murders forever unsolved, their killer's identity forever unknown.
If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't vanish into the darkness without hitting that like button. Share your scariest experience in the comments below, because your story might be featured next. And remember, the scariest thing is missing out. So subscribe now, before the next nightmare finds you.